If we ever got to the chance to make a Venom movie together, that would be super cool. But his movie would have to take place in the MCU because I'm not giving up my ticket in the MCU.
Don't.
Don't what?
Don't give me hope.
I'm sorry I couldn't give it to you sooner.
Hey everybody, it's Charlie. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to digest some of the Spider-Man, Marvel, Sony news. We have a whole bunch of updates, the plot thickens, and the conspiracy theories are only going deeper. Everybody right now is feeling Ronin Hawkeye. Don't do that. Don't give me hope. But we'll break it all down. We're doing the Avengers Endgame and Spider-Man Far From Home Blu-ray giveaways. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave your best theory about what's going to happen with Spider-Man 3's plot if it's just Sony making that movie. So yes, there is a chance that Marvel can still save the deal. There was a lot of back and forth. Sony finally issued an official press statement on the whole thing. Apparently all the news that we heard about yesterday, the deal falling apart, was someone on the inside. The calls coming from inside the building. So put all your tinfoil conspiracy hats on. It sounds like somebody inside the deal is trying to influence it one way or another using the fandom, like you litigate things in the press by leaking details about big lawsuits or big business deals. It's a very, very common tactic that businesses use in Hollywood. But for those of you that are asking, why doesn't Disney make this problem go away by just buying Sony Pictures, by the studio? The reasons why Disney can't do that should be pretty obvious. They'd become a legit monopoly if you weren't already worried about them becoming a monopoly. Additionally, adding all the Sony stuff on top of the Fox stuff would definitely make them a monopoly. The government would probably never approve the deal, and Disney just spent almost $100 billion buying Fox's assets, so there's no way that they would turn right around in the next couple of years and do the exact same thing with another studio. But the good news is that the rights to Spider-Man would revert back to Marvel if Sony did sell their studio to someone else, or if they stopped making Spider-Man films, but they're never going to stop making Spider-Man films. They make way too much money on those. So we got a whole bunch more details about what's going on, what the future of Spider-Man is. We'll just break this down top 6 style because it gets a little complicated, but not quite as complicated as you think. 6. Why did the deal blow up? So it all began yesterday afternoon when Deadline ran their story saying the deal fell apart because Disney wanted 50-50 co-financing deal where Disney would pay half of the money to make all the Spider-Man films, including the Venom movies and any other animated Spider-Man films, all the spin-offs that Sony is making, not just the Tom Holland Spider-Man films. Right now, Sony pays for 100% of the production. That's why they make most of the money on all the box office. Now there's a new report claiming that those numbers are fake, and what Disney was actually asking for was a 30% stake in future Spider-Man movies. They're not asking for 30% of the profits, they're asking for the right to pay for 30% of the production, but then by becoming a 30% partner, they would wind up making a lot more money in the long term. That was the deal that caused Sony to walk away from the table. Like, they didn't even try to counter. There were other financial terms that Sony offered which Disney turned down. They were pushing for the 30%. That's when Sony said flat out no, and then both parties walked away from the table. So 5. What happened next is the outlets were reporting that there was still a chance that things could work out long term, and Spider-Man might not necessarily be out of the MCU for good. After everyone set the internet on fire yesterday, there was a Sony rep speaking to reporters that claimed that the dispute between Marvel and Sony was mostly just due to a producing credit, and then right after that, Sony issued their official press statement on what had just happened. So I'm just going to read their statement. It goes like this. Much of today's news about Spider-Man has mischaracterized recent discussions about Kevin Feige's involvement in the franchise. We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision to not have him continue as lead producer of our next live-action Spider-Man film. I'll explain what that means in a second. We hope that this might change in the future, seeing that Sony might come back to the table, but understand that the many new responsibilities that Disney has given him, including all their newly added Marvel properties, talking about all the Fox Marvel stuff, X-Men, Deadpool, Fantastic Four, do not allow time for him, Kevin Feige, to work on IP they do not own, that Disney does not own. Kevin is terrific, and we are grateful for his help and guidance and appreciate the path that he has helped put us on, which we will continue. So for unpacking all that, they say a whole lot of stuff and they imply a lot of behind-the-scenes things that were going on this whole time. They revealed recently that Kevin Feige secretly was helping them make all their other Spider-Man movies of any kind without any credit, without his name being anywhere on the movies, going back to Andrew Garfield era Amazing Spider-Man films. Even before that, he had a lower producer credit on the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man films. Before Marvel Studios really became Marvel Studios, he was working under Avia Rod when they were originally making those early Spider-Man films. So that means that Kevin Feige also helped make the Venom movie, they just didn't put his name anywhere on the film. So this is Sony doing major damage control because their stock slid just a little bit. So of course their CEO, the president, came out and said something like, look, people are taking this the wrong way. That's not exactly what's going on here. But in that statement, when they editorialize about Kevin Feige being way too busy to work on their films, which is kind of laughable, they're also saying that if there were Spider-Man films that you didn't like or you thought were bad, that Kevin Feige also helped on those too, so he's partially to blame if there are things that you don't like about previous Spider-Man films. There are a lot of people also wondering what the Disney people did to make this deal fall apart. Apparently it was also Alan Horn, Kevin Feige's boss, not Kevin Feige himself, who was negotiating for new terms on this Spider-Man sharing deal. 3, what does this all mean? So, put your tinfoil conspiracy hats on. It sounds like during negotiations, Alan Horn, Kevin Feige's boss, said that Kevin Feige was way too busy to produce the films for almost no money like they'd been doing in the past, because all the new Deadpool, X-Men, Fantastic Four films were coming down the pipe. But like Sony says, Kevin Feige has been shadow producing a lot of their Spider-Man films this whole time, while he's also been making the MCU a billion-dollar enterprise. So it's a situation where Disney is telling them in these negotiations that Kevin Feige's time is worth billions of dollars, like you can literally put a price tag on it because of how much money they made this year alone. But Feige has been working for 5 cents on the dollar this whole time. So they're wanting Sony to pay for the pleasure a little bit more. Like they're basically getting their best asset, who is Kevin Feige, for almost free. So that's what Sony means when they're saying we regret Disney's decision to not have Kevin Feige continue as lead producer of our films. So it's really Kevin Feige's boss who's saying we're not going to let him produce any more future Spider-Man films. And 2, I saw a lot of you asking questions about this. Further complicating things is all the other non-movie Spider-Man projects going on, the TV shows and the video games. You're a big fan of Marvel's Spider-Man game, one of the best games of all time, not just Spider-Man games, but one of the best video games of all time. Sony just bought Insomniac Games, the makers of Marvel's Spider-Man franchise. Right now they're working on a sequel to that. Based on the post-credit scene, it's probably going to revolve around the Harry Osborn version of Venom and Norman Osborn. Marvel actually owns the rights to the Spider-Man video games, so even though Sony bought the game studio that made that game, they still don't own the rights to the Spider-Man video games. They'll make a lot of money on whatever the sequel is, but most of it will go back to Marvel and Disney. You may have heard about all the live-action Spider-Verse TV shows that Sony is developing with Lord and Miller. Remember, Marvel owns the TV rights to Spider-Man, meaning that Sony has to get a contract with Marvel to do all that stuff on the side. So just because the movie deal seems like it's melting down around us doesn't mean that Sony and Marvel have problems working together on everything Spider-Man related. As the press release says, it's really more about the creative control and the right to produce what the story, who the actors are, how they make the movies for the Spider-Man solo films. It's not so much about having Spider-Man in the MCU. So your number one question, what is the future of the Spider-Man character in the movies right now? Well, as of right now, per Sony's statement, they're planning on 2 more Tom Holland Spider-Man movies. They definitely plan on crossing him over with Venom. We've all talked about that. Kevin Feige has confirmed it. They talked about live-action Spider-Verse. But the other thing that might happen now is that you might actually see Spider-Man in a rated R film, because reports about the deal say that the reason why the Venom movie was originally supposed to be rated R, but then at the last minute they turned it into a PG-13 cut, was because they wanted to cross Spider-Man over with Venom, and they wanted Venom to be able to cross over into the MCU. But they were worried that if they made Venom rated R, it would cause a lot of problems for that, because the MCU movies will always be PG-13. Deadpool is kind of the exception to that now with Fox, but a lot of this was all done before the Fox-Marvel deal went down. I think Spider-Man solo films are always going to be PG-13 because he's so popular with younger audiences, they want them to be able to go see the movie. What'll probably happen, though, is they try to put him in a rated R movie. That would be your Venom versus Carnage film or Maximum Carnage. Like doing a legit rated R version of Carnage, and then Spider-Man is in it teaming up with Venom to stop him. Whatever you thought of the Venom movie, I definitely think we would prefer a rated R version of Carnage. Right now, Sony has plans to release Spider-Man 3 summer 2021, so that'd still be during Marvel Phase 4. So Disney and Sony have 2 years to come back to the table to work out a new sharing arrangement. There's still a chance they could save this and Spider-Man won't be out of the MCU completely, but for now, at least for the next 6 months or so, it seems like Kevin Feige won't have any kind of creative input as to what happens with Spider-Man 3. Everybody post your Spider-Man theories in the comments below. The Disney D23 Marvel Phase 4 panel is happening this weekend. I'll do videos for all that stuff, and the Spider-Man Marvel-Sony situation is still developing, so if we get big updates on that or we hear about big changes, I'll do a new video about that too. While you wait for everything, click here for my Spider-Man video from yesterday, and click here to learn about why the Russos are talking about Nova in Avengers Endgame. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.